What is going on, you guys? How are you doing? Are you guys awake? Raise your hand if you got more than 4 hours of sleep. Wow, that's like 50-50. That's not too bad. I'm pretty impressed, actually. Well, anyways, hey, I just want to say welcome to session 2 of My Life. My name is Jeremy, and I'm one of the small group leaders here with the senior guys group. They're over there. There they are. In case you can't hear them, here's a picture of these guys right here. This was My Life last year. We went and jumped around at a gymnastics gym. It was pretty fun. And it has been awesome the last couple years being a small group leader. It's been such a blast. We've learned a lot of things about each other. We've discovered things about God, and we've grown in a lot of ways. I will be honest with you, though. I think I have my first gray hairs at 25 as a result of this small group, if I'm honest. Steve, on the other hand, he had a lot before he was a small group leader, so he just has a lot in general now as a whole. But anyways, it's been great. I love getting to be a small group leader with these guys, and I know that I don't know all of you yet, and so I just wanted to start off introducing myself a little bit, telling you a little bit about me. I'm married to this beautiful woman. Here is Ashley, my wife. And those are our two dogs. This is our little family. We don't have any kids yet, but Bear is the little one. He's got like a little man complex like his daddy. That's what I always say. And then Breck is our golden retriever, and looks can be deceiving. He's the dumbest dog you've ever seen in your life. I swear, he's not smart at all. But that's my family, and I first came to North Point about 10 years ago. I went to Vista Ridge High School growing up here. We got any Rangers? Yes. Went to Vista Ridge High School, and then I went on to college to the greatest university in the world, UT. Yeah. Should really cheer more for UT, I think, but it's whatever. So I went to UT, and I would say my time at North Point was fantastic. And today, I'm privileged to say that I get to be the service programming director, so I get to be on staff here at North Point. I work with our adult team for our adult Sunday morning services. And as I look back on the last 10 years at North Point, thinking about, being a student and then being a part of these events in a lot of different capacities, I've met some of my favorite people in my life here at North Point, and I would go as far to say that North Point has really become like my own family. I met Ashley here 10 years ago. Not only that, I met some of my best friends here, mentors and leaders who have poured into my life. It's really become like a family to me, and it's because of events like My Life, where we're coming, we're hanging out, we're growing together, we're bonding. It's because of these kind of things that has happened in my life. And when I think about that, and I think about what North Point is to me, it really makes me think of this movie right here. Anybody in here, you guys see this movie? Raise your hand if you've seen The Sandlot. Okay, this is great. I talked to a few people who had not seen it, and I was like, cancel everything you have. You need to go watch The Sandlot. It's a great movie. Don't watch the new one. The new one's terrible. Go back and watch the old one. It's way better. But what happens in this movie is you have Scotty Smalls, who moves to a new neighborhood, and then he meets all these guys, and they play baseball at The Sandlot, and this ball goes over the fence, and there's this dog, and there's this whole thing. But anyways, Scotty Smalls discovers this group of friends as he moves into this neighborhood. And what's really cool is that, each of these kids, they have like a different upbringing, a different home, a different background. And as the movie progresses, you discover more about them as it goes. You kind of discover it as Scotty discovers his new friends. And you begin to discover that all of these kids have their own isms. They have their own isms. And here's what I mean by isms. It's kind of those personality things. It's those traits that we all have. It's kind of the things that make us. Like, it's just the things about us. It can be weird or quirky or whatever it is, but it's the things that make us us. And throughout the movie, Scotty discovers all of these different isms that these other guys have. So for instance, Scotty has his own isms. He has his Scotty isms. And then you've got Squint. Squint has his own isms. And then you have Ham. Ham is a nickname for one of the guys in the movie. He's got his Ham isms. One of the most well-known quotes from this entire movie is something that Ham says, one of his isms throughout the movie. And I want to see if you guys know it. See if you can, somebody already said, "You're killing me, Smalls," right? Yeah. And that's one of the most popular quotes from this movie. And they all have their own isms. And the reason I share that is because for me, when I think back on my time at North Point and just the friends and the people and the relationships that I've discovered, I've really discovered people who I know their isms and they know mine, and we've kind of learned to accept each other anyways, and it's awesome. For instance, I'm going to share a couple of examples of people here. Buck has some isms. We call them his Buckisms. And one of them is just elephant in the room. You guys know it as soon as he took the stage last night. One of them is this right here. It's that head of hair. in the entire 10 years I've known him, I don't think I've ever seen it shorter than 3 inches, like just 3 inches standing up like that. And it's one of his buckisms. Another thing he does is when he walks into a room, he'll kind of just yell your name, even if we're like super close. So he'll walk into the room and he'll just go, Jeremy! Like really loud sometimes. And then I'll just reply back, go, Buck, Buck, and that's just kind of how we greet each other. And it's just become this like ism thing. Jordan, he was just out here a second ago. He has some isms as well. If you're having a conversation with him, he might get a notification on his watch and he'll look down on it and then he'll just like zone off. And he'll be there for about 30 seconds to 2 minutes probably, and he'll zone off, and then all of a sudden he'll come back and he'll realize that he totally did that to you, and you're like, okay, let's just start over. Let's start from square one. That's one of the Jordan-isms. Another one is Josh Montoya. If you've guys seen Josh Montoya, yep, there it is. If y'all have seen him walking around with a big old camera on his shoulder, he has some isms as well. One of the things that he always does is when he tells a joke, he gets really excited. So he'll tell a joke, and then he'll just like look around like this to see if anybody heard him or if anybody thought it was funny. And then if nobody laughs, he'll just laugh at his own joke. So it's awesome. But it's amazing because it's one of the things that makes Josh. It's one of his Josh-isms. I don't want to just throw them under the bus because I have isms as well. And I'm going to get a little vulnerable with you guys here, share some embarrassing things. For me, I went through middle school like any one of you did, and the whole men, boys, men in here, voice cracking, that whole thing. Well, for me, it never stopped. So I'm 25 years old, and my voice still cracks on a consistent basis, and it might happen in our time together today, so just want to give you a heads up on that. That's one of my isms that I get made fun of for a lot. Not only that, but I love Harry Potter. Any Harry Potter fans in here? Yeah, that's great. So I love Harry Potter. I've read all the books, seen all the movies like dozens of times, and this could either give me credibility or take all my credibility away. I have a Harry Potter tattoo. My brother and I got matching Harry Potter tattoos, so that's a little bit, out there. I'm wearing Harry Potter socks right now. Yeah, I'm in Gryffindor today. Yeah, I'm in Gryffindor today. I couldn't wear Slytherin socks coming to church today, so anyways. So I'm a big Harry Potter fan. Not only that, I really like romantic comedy movies. I know that's not very manly to say. I'm not a big fan of scary movies, but rom-coms, like I could watch those all day. And then lastly, something that I've shared here on stage before. And I was asking Ashley this week, I was like, hey, babe, can you help me out with this? Like, I'm trying to think of some of my isms. Can you reflect some of these back to me? And I quote, here's how she responded to me. She said, well, you want to play sports really bad, but, sports. And that's literally how she responded, because I am awful at sports. TZ, where you at? Here I am. What do you always say to me, man? Yeah, that's right. We just yell sports at each other. So I'm terrible at sports, but those are some of my isms, just getting a little bit vulnerable with you guys. And I think we would all agree that we all have them, whether we like it or not. But not only that, we all kind of desire people to know those things eventually. We desire to be accepted for the isms that we have. In other words, you could say that we all desire to have Sandlot friends. We all desire to have Sandlot friends, that close, tight-knit group of people that know us and we know them and we know all their isms and we just love each other anyways. Perhaps you're in here and you would say you have that group. Maybe it's your small group. That's awesome if it is. Or maybe for you it's a sports team, or it's your bandmates. Or maybe for you grew up down the street and you have this group of people there. Or maybe it's family. Or maybe for you've never had that group of people that you would say are your Sandlot friends, but you've always desired it. You've always wanted that in your life. Because I think we desire relationships like this in our life. I think we want these things. And I would go as far to say that these relationships that we want, relationships are always going to be arguably the most important aspect of our life. Let that sink in for a second. Relationships are always going to be arguably the most important aspect of our life. And here's why I say that. Because, regardless of whether or not you move away somewhere on the other side of the planet, or you're successful or you're not, you got lots of friends and family or you don't, relationships are so important. And if you look in our culture, you just see it everywhere. 96% of all Americans are going to marry somebody one day and do life with another person. Not only that, but if you look at just the radio and all the songs that we hear all the time, you can boil almost any song on the radio down to relationships. Like, you could even look at Crank That and Ride 'Em Dirty, and you could boil those down to relationships, most likely. I don't know, that might be a little bit of a stretch, but you could boil those down to relationships. I think this is why, when it comes time for the holidays, like family, school, work, it all kind of stops so we can spend time with our loved ones, because relationships are important culturally. I think this is why successful people perhaps get to the end of their life and typically they don't say, man, I wish I would have just climbed more ladder. Well, they typically say, no, I wish I would have spent more time with my loved ones. I think this is why, when we have memories of our life, probably some of the most hurtful ones or the most painful memories involve people because we lost someone or maybe there was a broken relationship. Relationships are so important, and I think we'd all agree that we want to have fantastic relationships with friends and family and significant others and our small group and everything. We want to have great relationships. But here's what you have to keep in mind when it comes to wanting those relationships is wanting to have great relationships with people is very different than having great relationships with people. It's like if you want the AirPods Pro, that's very different than having the AirPods Pro. Unless you're that girl who won them last night, then congratulations. There you go. Yeah, she was pretty excited. Wanting and having are two very different things. And what's interesting is despite all the things that we learn in our life, nobody really hands us a guidebook on what it means to have great relationships. Typically, we just learn how to relate to other people by how we grow up, our family. Maybe that's good. Maybe we have great people who model what it looks like to relate to other people in a great way, or maybe the opposite is true. Maybe we don't have a good model for relationships. But what happens is, we bump into other people, and as we bump into other people, we become friends, and we begin relationships with other people, and our isms start to come out. All of our isms, all of our good and bad isms. And you might know this if you've ever been in a dating relationship, like over time, you see more and more of these things. Ashley and I have been together for over 10 years now, which is crazy to think about. And there are still isms that we discover about each other like on a regular basis. Not too long ago, I was doing laundry, which is good, like good husbanding move right there. And I was doing laundry, and I pulled back the comforter on the bed, and I saw at the end of the bed, there was about a dozen pairs of socks just like lying there. And I had two realizations when I saw that. One, I realized that, okay, that means that Ashley gets in bed every night and with her feet takes her socks off and just leaves them at the end of the bed for weeks on end. And so that was the first one. And the second realization was, wow, so my legs aren't long enough for me to have discovered this at this point. So it was a little bit humbling to come to that conclusion. But I went and grabbed Ashley, and I said, hey, babe, can you tell me about this? And she freaked out. Her eyes got wide, and she didn't know how to respond for a second. And then she just said, you know what? You would miss that if I died. That's how she responded. You would miss that if I died. And now it's become this thing we say to each other when we bump into each other's isms. It's kind of morbid, but we just say, hey, you'd miss that if I died. It's this thing we say to each other. But this is what happens over time in a relationship, in a friendship, with family, with friends, whatever it is. You bump into each other's isms, and this happens. And it could potentially create conflict because some of these isms are great, but some of them are potentially hurtful or harmful. And so you have two imperfect people, because we're all imperfect, I think we'd all agree. And when you have these two imperfect people that come together, it creates an imperfect relationship. And if we don't know how to deal with these isms and the things that come up in a relationship, then ultimately it's going to end up hurting us in the long run, and we could potentially lose that relationship or set of friendships in our life. And I don't want that for any of you. I don't want anybody to look back on their life and just see a wake of broken relationships. I want you guys to have fantastic relationships, not just in your small group, but with your family and your friends as you go on to life in the future. And last night, Buck talked about what it meant to be for you, to understand that God is for you. And when we understand that we are sons and daughters of God, it causes us to not just be for ourselves and discover that God is for us, but we want to now be for other people. But in being for other people, and we have a lot of big hopes and dreams when it comes to that as a church with For Austin and this movement that we want to see. But if we are to be for other people, even in our city, as you guys go out later today and you're for people in our city, we must first understand what it means to be for one another. We have to understand what it means to be for one another, what it means to have great relationships. And by one another, I mean the people that you are literally sitting next to right now, the people who are in this room with you right now. Not just that, but your other friends who aren't here or your family that's not here. We have to understand what it means to be for one another. And so today I want us to ask and answer this question that I think is so important for our lives, and that is this, what does it really mean to be for one another? What does that really look like? What does it really mean to be for one another? And these two words right here, what's interesting about these two words is when you open the words of the Bible and you look at the New Testament, when the New Testament is about Jesus' life and the life of the early church, and you look at the New Testament, those two words show up over 100 times in the New Testament, which shows us that, Jesus put a lot of significance on relationships, and so did the people of the early church. It was very important to them. And so I want to look at a short passage that kind of connects dots on what it means to have great relationships, to be for one another, and to discover what that looks like in our life. It's in the book of Hebrews, and here's how it starts. It says, let us draw near to God with a sincere heart and with the full assurance that faith brings. Let us draw near to God. Let us step towards God. Why? Because he stepped towards us. Because of what Jesus did for us, now we have a relationship with him, regardless of what we've done, regardless of what we're doing or we're going to do. Let us draw near to God with full assurance, with confidence in that. It goes on. It says, let us hold unswervingly to the hope we profess, for he who promised is faithful. Now, this word unswervingly kind of stuck out to me this week, and the reason is because I'm accused of being a terrible driver. Ashley tells me all the time that I swerve a lot when I drive, and so I'm accused of that. And honestly, I don't think she has a lot of evidence. When I look back on my driving career, I would say, the only evidence she has is that from 16 to 18, I got into 3 wrecks. 2 of those were going backwards. And then not only that, I got 5 tickets from 16 to 18, so I don't know how I didn't get my license taken away. Apart from that, I think she doesn't. I don't think she has any evidence at all. There is a couple weeks ago, I backed into her car in the driveway, so that is another thing that happened as well. But apart from that, she has no evidence at all of me being a bad driver. But even with that, she doesn't like when I drive. So when we're in the car lately, I've really been trying to focus, and I go 10 and 2, and I kind of just stay focused on the road. And the craziest thing happens. It's like I drive straight. I just drive straight, there's no swerving at all, and I just drive straight when this happens. And that's kind of what this word unswervingly looks like. That's what this word unswervingly means. And it's like when you think about faith, it's kind of like we're on this life journey, and we're all holding on, we're going 10 and 2, and we're trying to stay focused on where we are going. Let us hold unswervingly. Why? Because he who promised is faithful, because of what God did for us. And you might be thinking, okay, Jeremy, you were talking about relationships. What does this have to do with relationships? I don't see where you're going here. But here's the thing, is because this is the foundational thing. Because when you place your faith and trust in Christ, what you discover is that the way you view yourself, the way you view God, and the way you view other people is now changed forever. And so the writer goes on, he says, but here is what is now true of you because of this fact that you have placed your faith in Christ and you are different forever. Here is what is now true of you when it comes to how you relate to one another. And let us consider, let us think about, let us look for opportunities for how we may spur one another. There's our 2 words, one another, on toward love and good deeds. Let us look for opportunities to spur one another, to push one another on towards love and good deeds. It goes on, not giving up meeting together, as some are in the habit of doing. Don't give up meeting together. This has changed your life forever. Don't lose sight of that. And I want to pause here for just a second because this is so important because we are all in this space right now. We are meeting together. When you guys come to Inside Out, if you've been to Inside Out, that is us meeting together and hanging out together. And what the writer is saying here is don't give up doing that. But why would we give up doing that? Our lives have been changed by this place. Why would we give up doing that? Well, here's the thing is over time, sometimes we drift away from remembering what Jesus has done in our life. And we might do this for a number of reasons. We might do it because of busyness. Maybe life is just really busy. Or maybe we do this because we're distracted. There's something new and shiny, or there's someone new and shiny. Or we might do this because of doubt. Maybe somebody says something to us and it discounts our entire faith, even though we don't know if they've even read the whole Bible and done their research and stuff. But we let it get to us, and we don't discover our own answers for ourselves, and so we walk away and we give up meeting together. Or maybe, and I think this one is real for all of us, or maybe for us, we give up meeting together because we just feel bad about ourselves. Maybe we did something nobody knows about, but we think when we walk into a place like this that everybody sees it and everybody knows about it. And the writer of Hebrews is saying, don't give up meeting together. Instead, let us consider, goes on the next slide, but encouraging one another, all the more as you see the day approaching. Let us consider how we can instead encourage one another to continue meeting, to continue connecting all the more as you see the day approaching. In other words, life is short and heaven is right around the corner. And oftentimes we lose sight of that, but don't give up meeting together. Jesus captures this, the embodiment of God's love. Jesus captures this in one of the most profound statements in the entire New Testament. I don't think we'll ever fully comprehend how this impacts us and what this means, but it's the best one another statement there is. Here's how he says it. He says, love one another as I have loved you. Love one another as I have loved you. You want to know how to relate to each other? Take your cue from Jesus. Take your cue from Jesus, to which we go, okay, well, how far do I actually have to go then to love that person? What if they hurt me really badly? And Jesus says, love one another as I have loved you. How did Jesus demonstrate his love? He died for us. It's that kind of radical approach to love. Love one another as I have loved you. There's a guy who lived about 80 years ago, and he lived during World War II in Germany. So imagine just the things that he saw and experienced. His name, I might butcher this, but his name was Dietrich Bonhoeffer. And this guy, he wrote a lot about God and Christianity and the world. And what's crazy about his life is the end of his life, he was accused of an assassination attempt on Hitler. Imagine being accused of that. And he was hanged 3 weeks before the Nazi regime fell. But he had a lot to say, despite this painful world that he lived in this time frame, he had a lot to say about what it meant to love another person. Here's how he phrases it. He says, what determines our brotherhood, our relationships, is because of Christ. Our community with one another consists solely in what Christ has done to both of us. What Christ has done to both of us. In other words, when we take our cue from what Jesus did for us, we do that individually to one another, to love one another as he has loved us, because we are changed forever. When you look at the New Testament, again, there are over 100 times that this word one another, this phrase is used. And if you were to kind of bring up what are the most significant ones, the ones that pop up the most, it would look something like this, the one another list. You could say Jesus, when he said, love one another as I have loved you, here's what he meant. He meant forgive one another. Forgive one another. Well, even when they hurt me like that, even when they did that, Jesus says, forgive them because I have forgiven you. He says, accept one another. Even when I don't really like that person, even when they bug me, accept them as I have accepted you. He says, care for one another. Care for them. Go out of your way to show that you love that person. Why? Because Jesus went out of his way to show his love for us. Encourage one another. Build each other up. Use your words in such a way that it encourages the people around you. Why? Because Jesus does so daily for us. Submit to one another. I mean, Jesus had the most radical picture of this in his life. He died on the cross in submission for us so we could have a relationship with him. And he says, submit to one another because I have first submitted to you. He says, restore one another. When things are going bad and things are going to go bad in life, we all know that's going to be true. When that happens, the people next to you have the opportunity to restore you. Restore one another. Lift them up. Why? Because Jesus does so for us. Carry one another's burdens when there is no restoration and that person can't get up on their feet. Just go alongside them. Just listen with them. Just empathize. Walk through the darkness, whatever they're going through with them. Carry one another's burdens because Jesus has done so for you. And lastly, bear with one another. Bear with one another. Well, what if they're just annoying? What if I just don't like them? What if we have conflict? He says, bear with one another. Why? Because Jesus has bared with all of us. Ultimately, you could summarize this entire one another concept and answer the question of what does it really mean to be for one another in this way. You can choose to one another, one another. Just that phrase, one another. To love one another as I have loved you. You can choose to one another, one another. To bear with, to encourage, to forgive, to be with, to restore. And notice this word choose because it's not based on what we feel. It's not based just on the feelings we have, but it's a choice, a conscious choice. Despite it being inconvenient, despite us not liking that person potentially, it is a choice to one another, one another. And here's what this means in our life. The implications is this, is that your faith is about one another. So often we approach God as if it's just, hey God, it's just me and you doing this, two musketeers taking on the world. It's just us. And this is how we approach God. But Jesus says, no. A greater indicator of your faith is how well you are one anothering one another. It's how well you treat the people you're sitting next to right now. It's how well you treat your parents, your siblings, your friends, the people who are sitting alone at school, at lunch, by themselves. It's how well you treat. Those are the greatest indicators of your faith. Not only this, but you can't follow Jesus without one another. It just doesn't work that way. We were meant to do this together. I think there's a reason that it shows up over 100 times in the New Testament. You can't follow Jesus on your own. If you isolate yourself from the church, you isolate yourself from God. Seniors in here, y'all listen up for a sec. You guys are going to go graduate and you're going to be in the real world in just a short amount of time. My hope and my prayer for you is that what you've experienced here at Inside Out and the community that you've found is that you can find the very same thing wherever you end up going, even if you move far away. Don't give up meeting together because you can't follow Jesus on your own. You weren't meant to do so. And the last implication for us is this. Don't quit on one another when it gets hard. Don't quit on one another when it gets hard. This is something that I think breaks my heart the most as I look at relationships around me and relationships in my own life. Because I think it is so easy when we have conflict with each other to just give up and run. I think that's the easy approach. But Jesus says, love one another as I have loved you. And my hope and my prayer for all of us is that we would not do that, but we would choose to face the uncomfortable, painful, potentially awkward conversations that it takes to fight for a relationship with another person. This means that sometimes you have to choose to be the person to say, I'm sorry. This means that sometimes you have to choose to be the person to forgive. This means that sometimes even in your small group, when you have a temporary conflict, you have to choose to not allow it to permanently take you out of a group that could potentially change your life and that you'll remember forever. Don't give up, even when it gets hard. Guys, I want to wrap up our time by sharing a personal story of mine. Somebody in my life that I have been challenged to one another just throughout, the last decade or so. And he's one of my best friends, and I met him in 5th grade. And actually, I thought what better way to share this story than to just invite him out here to talk with us. And so would you guys give a round of applause for your Inside Out director, Jordan Geist? Jordan, thanks for being here.
Yes.
I know you had a lot going on. Probably weren't planning on it.
Probably wouldn't be here otherwise this weekend.
Yeah, no, that's great,
so
man.
Good.
That's great. Hey, thank you for, sharing. It's gonna get a little bromantic in here. I just want you guys to know that ahead of time. So, anyways, Jordan, why don't you talk about how we met, became friends in the first place, what all that looked like?
Yeah, well, in our middle school days, basically Jeremy and I had the same kind of mutual friends. But Jeremy just had the coolest parents that let us stay up late and do whatever we wanted. So we ended up staying over Jeremy's house all the time. And I just was really intimidated by him because all I really knew him as was this world champion Taekwondo guy. He literally traveled the world. He had trophies as tall as me in his room. And it's intimidating to be around somebody that I think I've had 20 pounds on him our whole relationship, and to know he can kill me 15 different ways if he chooses to is intimidating. And so that was middle school, and then I think it was right around sophomore year of high school when my parents actually split. I started to stay at Jeremy's house just all the time because I didn't really want to be home and face home, and so his house turned into, his whole family even turned into kind of a safe haven for me. And he smuggled me into North Point on one of those Sundays when I'd stayed over.
Smuggled.
Yeah, and then we're in the same small group, and I think that's where it went from kind of having a mutual friendship to our friendship really, took off from there. So.
Yeah, and the same thing really happened for me after kind of that season in high school. I went through a rocky season going out of high school and into college with some family stuff and relationships going on, and I remember I would literally call Jordan in tears sometimes, and I would say, hey, dude, I don't know what else to do. I don't want to go home. Can I just come over to your house, and can I stay maybe for a couple days? And I'd call him, and he'd stop whatever he's doing. He would talk to me, and he would say, yeah, sure. Sandy, I don't think he would ever ask you if he could come over, if you're in here. Where you at? Yeah, did he ever ask you? Okay, well, thank you, Sandy, for letting me come over and live at your house a couple times. So thanks for that. But anyways, that's what would happen. I'd go over to Jordan's house, and I would say during that season is where the whole carry one another's burdens thing came alive for me in my life and our friendship, because that's really what we did. We carried one another's burdens, and we're there for one another, and I'm super thankful for that. And then we decided because of that we were going to do the whole roommate thing in college, and that's when you discover somebody's isms, when you live with them. I'll let Jordan share that one.
Yeah, those were the golden days for us. I think my advice, thinking about college, is that you would find a roommate that compliments you really well, because I think Jeremy and I really complimented each other, and it worked out great. I was really, really messy, and so he always had something to clean up because he's super neat and clean, and that worked out great.
Yep, it was great.
He's the technology wizard. He's our service programming director here, so he had LED lights in our room and surround sound in our dorm, so that means I always had a really cool dorm, which was great.
Good for you.
And then he went to bed really early early all the time, and so he never woke me up when I came in late all the time. So it worked out really well for me. I don't know if you thought it was as good. But
no, yeah, I mean, I loved falling asleep to Sports Center every night. I thought it was great.
It was wonderful. It was good moments.
Yeah.
And then I mean, most of freshman year was basically Halo 4 for like 5 hours a day.
Yep.
I failed a calculus test, dropped out of calculus freshman year, hated calculus. I didn't even have a full class load. And basically, whoever got a class first, we would like fast walk / like run to our room, and then whoever got there first would set up Halo, turn on the LED lights, the Halo theme song and surround sound. And it was like an
it was intense.
like.
Do you guys know the
thing.
Halo theme song? I wish we would have brought it. Yeah.
It's
like that whole thing.
Like yeah.
It's like super intense.
Yeah.
So we'd walk into the dorm and like we would like if I was sitting there I wouldn't even turn around to face him. I would just be staring at the screen and like the background music is going and the LED lights are on.
Yeah.
And then he just picks up the controller and we just sit next to each other and go. It was great.
You just like drop your bag and see your best friend in there at the chair. It was amazing. And then sophomore year then it was Smash Bros. Yep. We had 6 guys in our apartment. Our sophomore year 8 guys. I don't even know how many dudes we lived with. And we didn't call each other by our first names. It was just our Super Smash Bros. Names. For a year he was Marth. I was Thomas.
Yeah.
Ironically, both are female characters.
Yeah, both are female characters.
We just called each other out for a whole year. But I do think, like, a little more seriously with college, too. For both of us, college is a big time period where you just discover who you are in a lot of ways and what really matters to you and what your values really are because you're making all these decisions on your own. And so we were also just there in a big part of the growing up process for each other in a really big stage of our life where we really got to know each other and push each other in a different way in that time period. So.
Yeah, for sure. And it was around this time period that I would say our lives began to kind of run very parallel to one another because we'd been student leaders at North Point and then going to UT together. And then we didn't leave North Point, but we plugged back into North Point shortly after coming to UT. And we were making the drive. We were dating our high school sweethearts and like that whole thing happened. And so I would say around the same time as our lives ran parallel and we were leading up to getting engaged around the same time and getting married around the same time, I had this thing that began to come up in me. And the whole like fighting for relationship became pretty real for me when it came to our friendship because all of a sudden I found myself kind of measuring my self-worth based on what Jordan was doing. Like it was like this comparison, jealousy thing that would pop up all the time. And so I talked to one of my mentors about it, and he said, "Hey, why don't you just talk to me about it?" Which I was like, "That sounds terrible. Like, who would ever say something like that?" But I ended up doing it. So we went to the greatest restaurant on the planet, Chick-fil-A, and then had a conversation. And I just said, "Hey, bro, just want to let you know, like, I'm struggling with some stuff, and I know we're good friends, but I just have this like jealousy thing that keeps popping up." And we had that whole conversation, and it was a pretty humbling moment for sure.
Yeah, I mean, he bought me my meal and then dropped that on me, and so now I'm scarred when people buy me something that there's like an agenda.
My bad.
But it was such an interesting moment because on one hand, my respect for him just skyrocketed in that moment. I think for people in general, it can be hard to be authentic and talk about how we're really feeling. But I think for guys in general, that's a very rare thing for a guy to go first and say, "This is what I'm experiencing. I'm feeling jealous of you. This is what it's causing me to think." And so I had this immediate respect, and I was also at the same time super caught off guard because everything that he had just explained were like the voices in his head towards me. I felt that towards him our whole relationship. The whole way I've ever felt towards Jeremy is that he's always 2 or 3 steps ahead of me. Like, that's just always how I've seen him and perceived him. Jeremy is such a high character guy. Like, what you see on stage, he is twice that off stage. I mean, he's the guy that he goes to bed early, he wakes up early, he reads like crazy, he's super disciplined, he works out, he eats healthy, and I'm like, I can't keep up with this dude. It's like doing the right thing just comes naturally for him, and I'm over here feeling bad about myself all the time in comparison to him. And for him to sit down and say, "Hey, I'm feeling jealous of you," it was a marker moment for me to get to be honest with him, and I think set us up for what we're probably, we said over the course of 10 years, probably like 4 or 5 like craters in our relationship, big moments where either something happened in my life, starting with that divorce, that was kind of like how we started to get to know each other, was in a really hard time for me, or something would happen in his life, or something would happen between each other where we hurt each other, or something like that, and he kind of set this stage for we're just going to be real with each other, and we're going to continue to fight for a relationship with one another, and it is our relationship with Christ that's going to make this possible, and we're going to keep going back to that, and it started to set up, so many moments in the future that we wouldn't have had if we went our separate ways right then. So It was a big moment.
Yeah, it was where like it kind of made the big moments a lot better. So, the days, I think we had that conversation before we got married, or it was close to it. And I remember on a wedding day standing up there, and I just, the picture I'll never forget, looking at Ashley, but also thinking about like all the guys that are behind me, and you're behind me, and my brother's behind me, and just thinking about all the moments, the rough ones that we've had to fight for that, to like stand up next to each other and truly celebrate each other and not feel weird about it or not be in a weird space. And not only that, but I think having friends that you've had beef with, having friends that you've been through a lot with are the greatest friends on the planet. And it makes those great moments like so much better. Even through all the rocky times, we've just shared so many great moments together. Not just marriage too, but just even at North Point. Seeing the life change and being a part of Camp 75 and all the baptisms and everything that happens, it's been awesome. It's been so fun.
Yeah, I think for me, when we were talking about this message today, like I was reminded of a thing that one of my mentors told me, and he said, you can have one friend or you can have 100 friends and still feel lonely. I mean, it doesn't matter. And so for me to have a guy who like genuinely knows me, I still don't think one person can fill that gap. I think God's involved in that, but to have one person who genuinely knows me, I mean, it fills that so much. There's been times where I've been on stage and I've given a message, and I went off stage and people said something nice or that was good or whatever, and it feels good, and then Jeremy will stop me backstage before I even get to the green room, and he will be like, dude, hey, what's wrong? Like, are you okay? And he would know by something subtle, something about my mannerisms. He just knew I was off or I wasn't in that right headspace. Or we'll be sitting in meetings and I'll see, the room seems fine, but I know something just hit him the wrong way, or he just got angry about something. And I'll shoot him a text, either trying to make him laugh or just let him know that I saw it or whatever it was. And there's these, isms that we've picked up on with time that I don't think you can really get to without what Jeremy, modeled first to fight for that relationship. And I honestly think like we would both say, this is not exaggerating, this is not because we're here on the stage. I really don't think we'd be friends without our relationship with Christ. I mean, honestly, there would have been so much comparison, so many moments where we would have just stopped and gone our other ways and been acquaintances. Yep. And I think, throughout, our lives, we could do that. I mean, we could have a couple of groups of surface level friends and then just move on to the next group of surface level friends when somebody hurts you or makes you angry or whatever. And then I think as a result of everything that he just talked about in his message, that is why we've gotten to enjoy so many moments. I mean, a moment like this is so special for us to get up here and hopefully, thinking about future building, future facilities, so many moments that will be in the future. I told Jeremy, one of my favorite quotes was the very beginning of one of my favorite books. It's written by a guy named Andy Stanley. He's a leader and a pastor in Atlanta. And one of his books starts off this way. It says, blessed, which is basically like happy or purposeful, is the man who gets the opportunity to devote his life to something bigger than himself and who finds himself surrounded by friends who share his passion. And that like perfectly describes Jeremy for me, that we get to be a part of this together, that we make each other sharper and push each other and hold each other accountable. And I will listen to him because I know how well he knows me, and I know I shouldn't ignore his advice, and it can be difficult at times. But, those kinds of moments are made possible when we, put Christ first in it. So
yeah, and Halo is more fun that way too, for sure. Yeah. Yeah, guys, I had, I wanted Jordan to come out here just not because to say, hey, look at us, but to say like, saying all of this stuff, I don't just say it to you guys as like, hey, just love each other. It's going to be great. Just love each other. Like, I really think that having great friendships and great relationships is super difficult, and I've experienced that in my own life. But on the other side of it, and not to say like Jordan and I don't have a lot of stuff to figure out, but on the other side of it, I would say it is so worth it. It is so worth it to have those awkward conversations, to have those painful situations, and just work through them with another person, because on the other side, you get to be known, and you get to know another person in a way that is just, it's awesome. I'm so grateful for it. So thank you for being up here and sharing with us. And with that being said, I would just, last thing I want to encourage you guys with is just going back through, don't lose sight of relationships and the importance of them in your life. Don't lose sight of the importance of the people who are sitting next to you right now. And I want you guys to understand what it looks like to love each other as Jesus first loved you. So thanks so much for allowing me to share, a little bit of mine and Jordan's bromance with you. So anyways, Jordan, would you pray for us to wrap up our time?
Awesome. Let's do it. Heavenly Father, God, first, thank you that this many students, when they could do whatever they want with their time this weekend, would choose to be here with us and trust their time with us and hopefully take a step towards each other and towards you this weekend. I really ask that as we move forward throughout this day and we have small groups together and rub shoulders together and serve together and have fun together and laugh together, that, God, you would be present in all of those interactions and that you would continue to bring up to us the places, the moments, the conversations maybe we've been putting off that we need to have, or we need to apologize, or we need need to forgive or we need to fight for a relationship that we've let go by the wayside, God, because I think you have so much in store for that. And we discover so much more about you in the gospel as we do that as well. So I'm so grateful for Jeremy and his heart and his friendship throughout all of these years and what he got to share with everybody here today. And I ask you just continue to personalize that for each and every single one of us right where we're at. God, we love you. We need you. And it's in Jesus' name that we pray all these things. Amen.